What are the different ways that the big health movements talk? I'm asking specifically about the difference between One Health, Planetary Health, and EcoHealth, but not from a practitioner's point of view, rather from a linguist's point of view, which is my specialty. I'm using a technique called critical discourse analysis, and I've analyzed a big body of work that's published by these three movements, and I'd like to share with you my findings. Now, I used these three partially because of inspiration from a paper that I read a long time ago by Lerner and Berg, which looked at One Health, EcoHealth, and Planetary Health. But I was also inspired by a talk at our school by Professor Pfeiffer in 2018 during a talk on interdisciplinarity as the future of this type of collaboration. And he said kind of a throwaway line that now they want us to call it planetary health. And so I started looking into it. And at that time, planetary health was still a new movement, but now here in 2025, it's become quite a lot larger. So most of this talk is going to be about planetary health and One Health. But let's start with a frequently asked questions page answer from Planetary Health Alliance website. Now, I do think that this website is a good representation of Planetary Health Alliance values because they are a relatively centralized movement. Now, the language here is kind of generic and it sort of reads like something from the World Health Organization. So they say the Planetary Health Alliance recognizes the fields of these ones. They overlap in relation to theories, methods, stakeholders, and so on. Therefore, the difference between these fields is not clear-cut. However, each field tends to emphasize some approaches over others, suggesting that the difference is not in the approaches, but in the emphasis of the approaches. The italics are mine. Each field brings many important perspectives and knowledge to our common challenges, and only by working together will we be able to reach our aspirational goals. Okay, so that sounds very friendly and hopeful, but I am skeptical. So, coming from a veterinary medicine school, I'm a One Healther, and I feel like our movement is older than the Planetary Health movement. One thing to point out, they do use environmental health rather than eco-health, and it's understandable because actually eco-health is more of a consortium rather than a global movement. This was the only case of One Health ever used in their entire website. So do they really believe this? So here is a phylogeny timeline, really, of the One Healths and when they broke off from sort of like the original historical models of, Aristotle, Galen, and so on. Because there was comparative medicine in the days of Galen, actually, and Virchow famously said more than 100 years ago that between human and animal, there is no dividing line, and nor should there be. For our purposes, I think these three are of interest. One Health is about 20 years old now, just over. And EcoHealth, to me, actually, this branch, I showed it as independent, but it's possible to draw it as a branch off of One Health because Dr. William Karesh, who helped to, really found the One Health movement in the modern era, he became a board member on EcoHealth. So it is like a lot of veterinarians involved in both of these. But Planetary Health is unique. It should have its own line here because it's really founded by physicians who have not historically been a major part of these two. And adding to my skepticism of their true intentions of being part of One Health, one of the major sources I used in this study was the Rio Declaration of 2021, where they had a 5-day conference of something like 100 speakers, and there was no veterinarians involved at the entire thing. They had a lot of MDs, a lot of microbiologists. They had indigenous voices. They had sociologists. So a lot of things that I actually am happy about, but why no veterinarians at all? I mean, it almost seems like you would have to try to not have any samples of One Health on your website. Finally, I did include One Welfare here at the end. This is a newer movement that I'm not very familiar with, but could be interesting as well, but I'm not really going to talk about that. Here's another way to look at it. This is how often do these terms appear in print according to Google Ngram Viewer. The global health sort of time period has kind of begun in the last 3 or 4 decades, and among them, One Health was the one that emerged first, especially from the 2010s, which includes our school, which began using this language around 2011, 2012. Planetary Health, as expected, started to get its boost in 2016-17, and I would assume that if we could get more recent data, this number would really increase, just as One Health has, and that has to do partly with the coronavirus pandemic. Now, here's the core of my analysis. I'll start to get into my data. So these 3 groups, Planetary Health, EcoHealth, One Health, and EcoHealth, they all are interested in using phrases that begin with trans, inter, and multi. Okay, things like transition, transdisciplinary, translation, international, interdependence, and multiple, multidisciplinary, and so on. If you look here, this is the absolute number that these phrases are used in each corpus. A corpus means a large collection of texts that I assembled for analysis. This is the absolute number, but what's most important is the normalized number, frequency per token. And so they are all sort of on the same factor of 10. There's not a huge difference. I mean, overall, if you kind of take the average, so EcoHealth uses multi more, One Health uses inter more, and Planetary Health uses trans more. It's not a huge difference, except that we do see Planetary Health really leaning into trans, and that's partly because of the great transition that they talk about. They say our world must undergo a great transition in order to achieve sustainability. But it's not that surprising that all of these movements are trying to talk about reaching out to the other side. But my question is, how much do they really mean it? So I'll give you this quote from Bhaskar that I like. Authors tend to justify interdisciplinarity according to their particular disciplinary focus. Another way to say this is that you bring your own biases into the interdisciplinarity game. So if you are a biomedical researcher, to be interdisciplinary might mean to reach out to physicians, microbiologists, environmentalists, even chemists or biotechnicians. And then you'll think, yeah, that's very interdisciplinary. Oh, wait, we should also include the humanities. Let's get a social scientist. What kind? Oh, I mean, just a social scientist, Whereas if, you could play this game from lots of different points of view. If you're a social scientist, you might say, oh, but we need someone from the medical field. Okay, let's get a doctor. Okay, that's enough. The world is way too vast now to be absolutely interdisciplinary. Let's try to quantify how, multidisciplinary each of these people are being. Now, in this study, I looked at something called the coronavirus corpus, which is out of the BYU corpus family. And my date range is about 3 years, from 2020 to 2023 January in each case. I searched the terms Planetary Health and One Health to get a total of around 300 files each. And within those files that talk about Planetary Health and One Health, I looked at how many times did they use words like humans, humanity, humanitarian, and so on, and animals, environmental, and so on. And how many times did they use these words? And here's the main outcome. So Planetary Health talks about humans about 1.5 times more than One Health. Not that surprising if they are physicians, I suppose. They talk about animals at less than 1/3 the rate of One Health, and the environment just under half of the rate of One Health, which is somewhat striking. For me as a One Healther, to see humans and animals roughly even is not a surprise, and that the environment is, lagging is also not a surprise. As much as One Health says that it's reaching out to human, animal, and environmental sectors, well, when it comes to the environment, in my experience, it tends to be from the wildlife sector. So we're interested in the environment in as far as it contains animals of interest, especially those that transmit zoonoses. For the Planetary Health one, I was not surprised to see the animals being low, but the environment being low did surprise me. However, this is a very preliminary data set, and one of my students pointed out that Sensei, you might not see as much of the word environment, but that could be because they're actually talking about something more specific, like ocean acidification or land use change, shifting from primary forests to oil palm plantations. And they are actually very interested in those kind of concepts. But there's other reasons to wonder about how much Planetary Health people are truly focused, but let's look a little bit more. I'm going to give this analysis from a linguistic point of view that suggests that the physicians are still speaking from a perceived position of power. And here's my evidence. So if we look at the Planetary Health corpus, we see lots of these verbs that are telling people what to do. They're using a lot of things that say encourage and empower a diverse community, facilitate the education of training, promote sustainable intensification practices. It's like, do this, do that. And I found 30 more cases in this particular document, which I labeled here. I'll show you the documents at the end. The One Health people don't talk that way. The way when they tell you to do something, it's just it's boring. It's to direct you to see something. EcoHealth people too largely are saying, learn more this way. Watch our video. Donate now. So, okay, yeah, sure, donate, but this is more instructional rather than motivational to go out and do something. Another one is modals of motivation. Modals is a grammar word to say like may, must, will, need to, things like that. The Planetary Health people have a lot of these. We will need to and can effect urgent, deep, and structural changes. Who is the we? I'll come back to that in a moment. The COVID-19 pandemic must serve as a moment of transition for humanity. Justice, equity, and compassion must be the driving forces behind a future for all. I'm like, okay, you're really telling me what I must feel. All right. What do the One Health people say? Diverse health professions must work together. Okay, well, they do use must a little bit, although they're not trying to talk to everybody about everything. They're saying diverse health professions. One Health shall be achieved through cooperation and so on. With the One Health approach in place, it will be easier for people to better understand. Okay, so that's more of a predictive modal rather than something that's telling people what to do. Now, EcoHealth does have one. I only found one. We can and should get out ahead of outbreaks. So, okay, there's EcoHealth sounding a little bit like Planetary Health, but that's the only time. If we look at the numbers, we do actually see that the modals are used by each group evenly. But if we look at the type of modals, the stronger ones are used by Planetary Health more often. They don't use the may. They do use can a lot more, but they like to use would and will and must and need. And as we saw, the One Health and the EcoHealth people don't really tell people what they must do, what they need to do. That's this authority. The Planetary Health Authority talks that way. Another way that we can tell that the Planetary Health folks feel very confident about what they're doing is they talk about the first person a lot more. The first person pronouns, meaning we, ourselves, and us. Okay, Planetary Health uses this a lot more, but the big difference is it self-referential or not? So when the EcoHealth people say we, they actually mean we at EcoHealth are doing this and that. When Planetary Health says it, they're not talking about themselves in the majority of the time. They're talking about we as humanity, we the global community must. They want to use their voice to speak for all of us in their documents. That's not the way that One Health and EcoHealth talks, because these people are really researchers. The Planetary Health people are promoters. Let's look at some examples. So if you're going to be self-referential, it's just kind of boring. We publish peer-reviewed research. Okay, our work is collaborative and transdisciplinary. That is what we are at EcoHealth Alliance, scientists. So they are more likely to use non-self-referential first-person pronouns, such as design cities to dramatically reduce our ecological footprints. The One Health people might say the health of people is closely connected to the health of animals and our shared environment. Okay. EcoHealth. Some undiscovered viruses present little to no risk to us. What am I trying to get at here? This is kind of like one sentence that helps me to make the point I'm trying to make. The Planetary Health Alliance website says, Planetary Health is supported by scientific evidence about the connections between human well-being and the state of our natural systems. We are committed to supporting the growth of that knowledge, curating and synthesizing it for our community, and disseminating it to the general public. Well, no. So this hour and this hour are kind of the same. It means the collective, non-self-referential us. We means Planetary Health Alliance. This is tricky. If somebody is going to switch pronouns on you like this, it's a signal to be aware that they might be trying to influence you in a way that is not just with data or logical argument. They're using some rhetoric here. We at Planetary Health Alliance are committed to supporting that growth of that knowledge and synthesizing it for our community. Our community does not just mean the PHA community. However, do I completely disagree with their tactics? Not necessarily. They've got the funding from Rockefeller Foundation. They've got a voice from the Lancet. They've got their own journal already, the Lancet Planetary Health. And they used to be mainly based with the Harvard Medical School. My student told me today that they have recently changed to Johns Hopkins University. So, yeah, poor them. They lost Harvard and they only got Johns Hopkins. Do I sound jealous? As One Health practitioners, are we supposed to just sit and be jealous, or are we supposed to learn from them? Are we supposed to try to take some of this knowledge? Because they seem to be better at promotion. They seem to be better at getting some headlines and funding from influential actors. But through talking to my students, I realized something else. I've been coming at this from the not having as much funding as the human doctors, not getting as much respect as the human doctors. But one of my students told me something very interesting, that it goes both ways. The human doctors could also be having a certain complex, a certain jealousy even, that One Health tends to be the language used by the WHO and other international bodies, whereas One Health has historically not included physicians to a very large extent. And is that why the physicians needed to felt the need to create their own movement of planetary health. So how much are we just cross-talking rather than cross-collaborating? I'm trying to suggest some areas where the two groups might not be talking to each other as much as they should be. I'm not trying to say which group is right or wrong. In fact, from a personal point of view, I might very well be more sympathetic towards the planetary health people. I think that they see things and they can say things that the veterinarians can't say. For example, I hear veterinarians say things like, our cattle just are chronically sick. They are reaching their peak of milk production, and even now their fertility rates are going down. The fertility rates peaked 20 years ago, and we're having this problem with repeat breeder cattle that are not producing offspring as fast as we want them to. Why not? In fact, even though the milk productivity is either going up or remaining stable, the fertility rates are going down. What can we do? Can we give them more drugs? Can we give them more hormones? Is there a molecule that we can find that will keep that up? And then if I raise my hand and say, perhaps they're stressed. Can we reduce the concentration, or somehow can we reduce the expectation to have a calf every year? And, I'm going to be maybe laughed at in the group, and they'll say, hey, Mike, he's not a veterinarian. He doesn't really understand the way that economics work. But the planetary health people can say that because they don't as much feel the need to represent the farmers and the economy that has been established by the farming community. They can say, we need to reduce our farming footprint. We need to have less meat in the global market. And I think veterinarians are actually kind of not allowed to say that. Some of these issues that planetary health brings up are a little bit taboo to the One Health people. Because after all, veterinarians serve society, not just animals. And society, for them, often means farmers and agricultural industry. So I'm just trying to say that not one is better than the other, but that they're coming at this global health issue from two different perspectives, and we need to be sympathetic to where the other one is coming from if we are truly going to get good collaboration. I'll just show you where I got my data from. You can pause this if you want to. These were the texts I used in my study from Planetary Health, One Health, and then these are the texts from the EcoHealth. I haven't looked into it, but this is the intro to One Welfare. Thanks for your attention, and hope to see you collaborating for the better health of the global community.